There you go. Hey guys, it's your humble host, Kill if you prefer. So we're live streaming again. It's been a while. I only do this occasionally now due to time and work. Anyway, instead of doing a recorded video and trying to upload it, I'm actually here with Brent and Metz again, and we're going to look over some new documents he got a hold of in regards to Miles. Trigger one in advance. This is once again similar to the Save James situation, but it's also different. So I'm going to bring him on. He's in a Skype call, so without further ado, let me knock up the desktop audio. Hello, Benton.
Hi, Kayla.
So how are you?
Oh, pretty good. Thank you for your continued interest in this case. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's not getting as much coverage as the Save James, but it's still important because it's showing that this is going on in multiple states and multiple people need to start getting involved. For a while, this stuff was actually hidden, but now it's coming to the forefront, and more people are getting angry and vocal about what is going on. So he gave me a 16-page document, Brenton did. I'm going to flip over to the TV, and we're going to take a look at that. I have an updated photo here of James and Miles. My bad. Brenton and Miles. And then, let me see. Kick that off. Okay, so I have the document pulled up. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me try to blow that up just a bit here on my end. Okay, so I have the document pulled up, Brenton. You gave this to me a few nights ago, and I've skimmed through it. I know you said you didn't want to keep this stream going for very long, or rather, follow up. What is one of the first things you want to look at when it comes to this document? Because there's a lot here.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just thinking that if we can keep it like an hour or less just to respect everybody's time, because everyone's so busy, so don't want to lose folks just because we keep going on and on. So I've been trying to just get down to the bare bones of what I would like to talk about. So, yeah, the documents I sent you, I just have them in order. And on my first page here.
What page are you on?
Well, it's I have it as number 1 that I sent you.
Okay.
With the scanner, but it says page 53 at the bottom.
Right.
And the date is 6/15/2016.
Okay, nope, I have that up.
Okay. Yeah, so I had to do some more work to get these notes from Centricare that are not related to the Troy Weber Brown gender clinic situation. Miles has been seeing people for quite a long time at Centricare, and these session notes that you're going to see today are before Miles started to see Troy Weber Brown at the gender and sexuality clinic. And I think it's pretty obvious that what's happening is children that have real emotional problems, which if you look through these documents, you will see that Miles does have real problems. They eventually just get dovetailed or kind of an umbrella diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which then means that the child stops getting the real help that they need. And so in Miles's case, since he's autistic, he also has an obsessive personality. He can just be led, which I think just takes the heat off of Centricare or the medical, the people involved to just kind of like take it off their plate for any sort of real help. And then it just gets on the gender dysphoria train, and then they take it from there.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, because I went and scanned through this document, and I even jotted down some stuff that stuck out. I know that you put pen notes by some things. On this first page, for example, you have outlined or whatnot. Patient's mom reported that the father is not really involved. She stated that the last fall, patient asked her for a dress, and she allowed him to have one. Patient's mom reported that this really upset the patient's father, and he has had little involvement since. So the implication is, oh, well, he's now wearing a dress, therefore the father doesn't, you, Brenton, don't want anything to do with him, when also it's pointed out in this document as well, and I forget which page because this kind of ties into it, that you and Sarah separated 4 to 6 weeks. If you want to touch upon that just a little bit, because I know it has to do with this as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, it's probably nobody's surprised that anytime there's like a separation thing going on in family courts or divorce court or what have you, people are going to try to tailor their side of the story to benefit them. But in this case, and I have read this quite a few times in all the the piles of notes that I've gotten over the years, is Sarah's story is that I just ducked out, because I couldn't handle Miles wearing dresses, which is not true. When this all started, when he was 7, I just said, well, he's not going to wear dresses at my house, and I'm not going to call him Miley. It's very similar to Jeffrey Younger's situation.
Mm-hmm.
He's being forced to, at least the last we heard, to treat James like a girl or Luna. So, and I just said no. And since I wasn't educated in how all of this goes at that point, um, Sarah just said, well, if you're not going to treat Miles as Miley now and allow him to be his true self, quote unquote true self, and wear dresses at your house and treat him like a girl, then you can't see him anymore. Now, it's not her call to do that. I mean, technically, she would have to go back to the family court and get an order that would take away my established parenting time. But at that time, and I'd been trying to, tell people this, is that I have been in battle in the family courts since Miles was 3 months old. And, everybody's got a breaking point. Now, in hindsight, because I had no idea about this, where all this gender dysphoria, I like just everything we're talking about, I had no idea. And I think most people don't. It's just kind of sneaking up on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't pay any attention. You kind of have to have it drop right in your lap. And so, at the time, I just thought, well, okay, I'll duck out and I'll repair the damage when Miles gets to be a little older and he has more of a say and he wants to come stay with me. But in hindsight, I wish I just would have stuck in there and started making the difference now, starting this battle 3 years ago. But I didn't. I wish I had.
Well,
If I would have known how serious this was.
Well, because there's not only are they changing the language, because that's people are catching on to that as well, but it's not, because it's been kept in the shadows for so long, it's not seen as a normal occurrence. And when Save James happened, it kind of blew the lid off of it. I mean, we first started reading about it in the UK and in Canada, but now with Save James and your case, we're just seeing the doors just fly wide open. It's like, no, this crap has been here for a while. Nobody's just been paying attention to it. Now people are going, I don't think so. You guys are not doing this. And we're also seeing more of a trend of, and I hate to bring this subject in, but the subject also ties into it because this is also exploiting children, but you're seeing like pedophiles and predators start to take advantage of it. We're starting to see that within our jails. So it's becoming more of an epidemic and more people going, yeah, no, my tax dollars are not going towards this, leave the kids alone. If you want, we can move on to the next point, or if you want to talk a little bit more about the separation, it's up to you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll just say really quick on what you just said is I think a lot of people aren't realizing that the Save James campaign or the Save James case is not resolved. It hasn't,
Mm-mm.
it's still ongoing, and there's an unconstitutional gag order on that case. And
Mm-hmm.
any person has to conclude that the reason why the system doesn't want Jeff talking about this or the media talking about it or Jeff talking to the media is because they know what they're doing is wrong. They know it's violating parental rights. They know it's not good for children, and it's revealing an agenda. It's basically censorship. And what they say is whatever side starts to censor is the side that's not correct. They can't make an argument. They don't have the argument. So we would be the public would be daily being informed and educated on this, what I think is one of the most important issues in our society right now, which is the medicalization of our children, the sexualization of our children. And Jeff, is finding himself right at ground zero on that because of how the Save James campaign broke through the media blockade. Um, and it's terrible. It's really tying our side, because he already got through, and people are interested. People want to know what's going on, but he can't talk about it. So it's like, you know I think a lot of people also don't realize, I didn't realize this too, is that a whole lot of work goes in for a long time before you ever hear about anything in the media. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, Jeff, you know this, probably better than I do, is that Jeff and a lot of people did a lot of work to finally bring it to the general public's attention, anybody that's paying attention. So that's kind of the stage that I'm at right now with the Save Miles situation. Is I'm just learning as I go. I'm not really a tech guy. I didn't even have a Facebook page till like 3 months ago. I didn't even have a Twitter account. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to get laid before I think people. It's kind of like it hits a tipping point, and then hopefully, if you have all the information sitting there waiting for people to discover when they finally get an opportunity to do so, that's what I'm working on right now. And you are one of the people that are helping me in this kind of building up stage, which again, I just want to say thank you very much for doing it.
You're welcome. It's not a easy thing to talk about, and these days, if the system, or I want to say algorithm, finds you, it could actually take out your entire platform. I've already had the introduction video removed, but it's backed up on BitChute, so I have other places to store it, if you will. If you want, we can move on to the second page below, if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay. This would be page 2. So this is one of 2, and then this, you have this penned here. This was the plan of action before the gender clinic. Let's see if you have anything specific penned in here. So what exactly is on these 2 pages, page 44 and page 45?
Okay. Well, I think that what's being said here, so to keep in mind that this is all before Troy Weber Brown at the CentraCare Gender and Sexuality Clinic got involved, is Miles was being taken as a child who has problems. And what you can see in here, that they're not calling him a her yet. They're not using them, they, their pronouns and so forth. And so this is where this should have stayed. And I can tell you that Miles does have, and I also want to say this really quickly, is that there, people don't, like, Miles is one kid. He's my kid. He's my responsibility. This is just, how things go, is that at the end of the day, everybody's got their stuff they're paying attention to in life. And, why care for some kid you never even met? I get that. Like, I wouldn't even ask people to do that. And that's not what I'm doing this about, is that I'm trying to drive home that Miles and James and other children, they represent a bigger problem here. And it's all like it's like an iceberg. It's just peeking through the surface right now, but right below, there are thousands and thousands of children who are either already in this, being geared up to be in this system, or they're going to enter it later if this doesn't get beat back. So, so anytime you just hear me talk about Miles, I'm not really even trying to get people to care specifically about my son. Just kind of leave that to me. But people need to be aware that the situation that's going on with my son represents kind of a faction of this problem, and that has to do with my son is autistic, and this gender dysphoria epidemic is disproportionately affecting autistic children, and the reason why is because they tend to be impressionable and they tend to be obsessive, and that would definitely be Miles. He has a very obsessive personality. Um, I try not to dip into the nature and nurture debate because it's just a never ending dilemma. But if there's some nature element to it, there's obsessive compulsiveness, in my family tree. There definitely is on Sarah's side. She takes medications for it. So Miles, in theory, got a double dose of kind of an obsessive personality, which they might just be calling up autism. Now, I think that these notes that we're seeing before the gender clinic got involved shows that if Miles was put on a different obsessive path, if he was, well, it would have helped if he was being introduced to to different things in life. But what happened was his mother kind of hijacked. I don't know if she did it intentionally, but it just kind of worked out this way.
Mm-hmm.
Is she hijacked his obsessive compulsiveness, or his obsessiveness, I should say, and directed it towards things that can be easily construed as being backing up a gender dysphoria diagnosis, like Disney princesses. I mean, up until age 7, that's what I had to do. I mean, I just kind of went, well, okay, my son's, we'll call it autistic. I don't really use labels, I try not to, but I said, okay, my son's into Disney princesses, and I can live with that. I just kind of worked with it and always geared it towards, we'd go fishing, and I'd say, well, Ariel was a mermaid, and she probably fished too, and I would just kind of work with it. So, in retrospect, I didn't realize I was kind of feeding the problem, because that can be, affirming. I probably would have done it differently if I would have, again, known where all this is going. But I think, to get back to these notes here, is that Miles his main problem is he has an obsessive personality, which makes him have a rigid personality, and he has a lot of anxiety. And that anxiety, when it hits a tipping point, makes him behave in such a way that Sarah can't handle him. Um, she has to then turn to these so-called experts that will help her in that regard. And I certainly could have helped. I mean, Miles did not have nearly the same degree of these problems when I was consistently in his life, and that's why I'm trying to get back in there. But I think it's going to be a challenge because of the family courts. But
Mm-hmm.
so be it. But what they've done is they've kind of just like narrowed the beam to where now it's, oh well, the whole reason why Miles has all this anxiety and he's suicidal, and that's something that I think we should talk about, at some point here,
Oh yeah, no,
is
we will.
because because he really wants to be a girl. He's really this two-spirited. I mean, they use a lot of the lingo, and but
Two-spirited, if I could cut in, two-spirited is an Indian term. It's not a known term, but continue.
yeah, it's just a lot of confusion. I mean, they've created their own, the other side. We'll just call them the other side. They've created their own lexicon. They've hijacked a bunch of words. They're making us use their words, and then they're defining the words so that every time we talk about it, in a sense, we're kind of losing the battle because we're pretending like they're correct. So Troy has my son calling himself a burl. Okay, a BIRL, a burl. That's half boy, half girl. Some days, sometimes he's a transgender lesbian. Sometimes he's a them. Sometimes he's they. Sometimes he's Lucy. I mean, it's. I think it's just intentional inducing of mental illness or schizophrenia, which then once again just kind of backs the child into a corner and the parent into a corner of like, the only solution here is if we finally just introduce puberty blockers, or if you got to let us introduce hormones. And it's like, Once they can get that train going, this this changes entirely. There's no more going back, and that's what I'm beating back at the moment. I mean, to me, that's kind of like what the where the beat the clock element of this, my urgency
Mm-hmm.
is that if I don't if I don't make a stand right now, like I'm pretty convinced that if I wasn't already making a dent here and there with the social media, talking to you, so forth, letting Centricare know, letting Troy Weber Brown know that someone's watching him, and more and more people are slowly watching him. I think the puberty blockers already would have been assigned. So yeah.
So, no, let me touch upon a few things because I actually got diagnosed with high functioning autism. And the social issues, I could just, again, I'm not a medical professional. I don't claim to be, none of those things. But what I can attest to and testify to as well is that when it comes to autism, which makes kids socially awkward depending on scale, whether you're high functioning, low functioning makes it even worse. But just with autistic children in general, they mimic certain behaviors because they're trying to communicate with other people. So you have him trying to do that, which again, this is all hypothesis, this is not conclusive. And then to top it off, because of separation, he has possible detachment issues or reattachment issues to where it's made him emotionally unstable because he had one of his parental figures, his father, suddenly leave the picture. And I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just saying in his brain, one of his parents went away. He doesn't know why. Because I know what's media have talked about before, to where he will cling to his mom. And then what's also mentioned in this document, which we'll also see, is that he's severely bullied by his male peers. Now, me growing up, I was bullied by like everybody because everybody thought I was mental, and a part of that came from my own trauma. We're not going to get into that, but looking back at my behavior, my parents went, we should have got her diagnosed with some form of autism, because that's what it was. I mimicked behaviors. I was very anxious. I had OCD. So what Miles is trying to do, in my opinion, is trying to mimic the behaviors that's going to get him the best communication. But people are purposely twisting that. It's like, oh, okay, well, he's being seen as a girl. No, he's sticking with the group where he's most comfortable communicating. Like for me, I hung around guys for the most part when I was growing up. I didn't want to be around my gender. But continue. Just wanted to point
Yeah,
that
no,
out.
no, I'm so glad you just brought up a couple things there that I might have missed. So yes, uh, so another element of autism, as far as I understand it, and I think I understand it pretty well. I've had to do a lot of research on it. I would wonder if I was a child today, if I would have been diagnosed with some form of autism. So Miles has an identity issue, okay, and that's really one of the key components behind this whole trans epidemic that we're seeing, is that people are having a hard, in my opinion, but I think this is more than just my opinion. I think there's just a lot of like intrinsic facts involved with this, is that people are having a hard time forming their identities. And one of the ways that people form their unique personal identities is by the interactions they have with other people. And since people are so atomized and alienated today and spending more time on screens than being outside and so forth just a generation or two ago, this is one of the reasons why children now are kind of taking on identities of their own. I could see it when I had my when I was with Miles, is that he was just like all children of that age, was just looking for what's his identity, and because of his being autistic, he was kind of like trying on different identities, and they just happened to be gearing towards Disney princesses and things like that. And so yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Another aspect to this is when you talked about the bullying and spending, wanting to be around girls, for example. You'll see in these documents that Miles wants to be around girls and not boys, and it states clearly in here before Troy got involved, is that the boys would bully him. Now, that does not surprise me. I never saw it. I mean, when he was around me, I wouldn't have allowed that to happen, but I can imagine that when Miles went to school or Miles was in a place where someone wasn't putting a stop to it quickly, is that some other boys would bully him because of his interests, because he was interested in dolls, and he would, especially if he starts wearing dresses and stuff like that. I mean, just setting up a kid to be bullied. And so he goes over to girls, and you can see how this would be a perfect example, not the only one, but that. So a boy in Miles' situation, for example, starts to gravitate towards girls because he's now not getting bullied or he's being more accepted. They just put another check mark in the he must be gender dysphoric, he must want to be a girl. It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and it's just because bullying can cause you to gravitate towards, depending on who's bullying you, group of people. Like for me, I got like tortured by various amounts, and this is like when I was a kid. So I'm not saying I'm being bullied now, but this is like in grade school, a little bit into middle school, and then it just kind of died out when I went into high school. And at that point, I was just completely antisocial. I actually got to the point to where I dressed like a goth because kids at my high school were legit afraid of them. I was like, hey, I can get left alone. Bye bye. And I just kind of adapted or adopted certain traits of. I'm not saying I'm a goth, but I dress like one. And anyway, but depending on who the person is bullied by, it can cause them to gravitate the opposite way. So yeah, I'll read here. I'm on page 42. I had to scroll around a little bit. Miles prefers to befriend female peers and often spoke negatively about male peers. Miles was encouraged to have positive interactions with male peers, and PHP and staff redirected his negativity about male peers. This writer believes that Miles' preference in female peers may be due to the history of bullying he has experienced with male peers. It seems that female peers are more nurturing and may have possibly stood up for him during these times. So, and this is also something key too, because I remember my father having discussions with my brother because he was getting picked on, and my dad, I remember something that my dad told him is like, do not start the fight, but if they freaking hit you, you double up your fist and you hit them back. Stand your ground. And this is something that Miles did not get growing up, so he didn't know how to stand up as a boy, which if you have a healthy relationship with your father or whatnot, you learn how to stand up as a man. So this also ties into that too, but of course it's not addressed at all. It's not even considered.
Yeah, and they're getting our children to a point now where let's just say Miles did stand up for himself. Let's say that was his personality, and he was being bullied and he stood up for himself. They would just check the box for he's being violent, and then
Mm-hmm.
that would be another indication that we can start sending them down the. It's a rigged game. It's a rigged game. I'll if I just quickly before I lose it here, I'm just taking notes. So to touch back a couple things we said ago about identity is, I believe, another key aspect to this is children. Miles has a problem with abandonment and rejection. Okay, and if a person looks into what are some of like the primary ingredients to most what they would call mental illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they'll lead back to people develop, usually in childhood, um, pathological fears of abandonment and rejection. And those are kind of the key components behind things like personality disorders and anxiety disorders and so forth, attachment disorders. Well, when you have a highly sensitive child, which often autistic children are, they become even more susceptible to the mental illnesses that will come out of that. Well, you look at Miles's history, he's been nothing but abandoned and rejected, at least from his perspective,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is just exacerbating these problems. Like, I'm not sure if I sent you these notes or not, but somewhere in here, the counselors before Troy came along would talk about how Miles was afraid of not being around his mother. He would he wants to sleep with her. He probably still does. He probably just has fits if she tries to put him in his own room and things like that. I mean, I wish I knew, but But he was like that when he was with me. Now that wasn't a problem for me. I just recognized it as he was very, he was clingy. This was part of his personality, and it was fine with me. Um, but Miles is now like, so Miles is taken to a place called the Clara House in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I just found this out within the past week. He's actually dropped off there by his mother now. Like he had to spend like weekends there, and I can't quite tell the dates, but it looks like more than a weekend, sometimes a week, maybe more. Can you imagine what a child is going through with a personality like Miles, or let's just say an autistic child, or any child in general, that's being completely abandoned and rejected, and that is your biggest fear? You're going to start developing coping mechanisms, and you're gonna start to live in your own little world, and you're going to populate your little world. And in this case, Miles would populate his world with princesses and whatever his interests are slowly evolving into. So you can see how this just all becomes like, it just like, I keep wanting to use the term, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like they have, instead of building a system that's going to help children with problems, which I would argue the only people that really can ever help children is their parents. I mean, hopefully we can touch upon how a lot of this is feeding into removing our parental rights from us. That's another huge component that, even if people aren't interested in, say, the transgender part of this issue, they need to realize that this is being used to remove our parental rights, and basically our children are now becoming, through the guise of having consent, that they can consent to something without their parents' knowledge or approval. The state is just starting to own our children. So there's that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Quickly to wrap that up, is that Miles is, I know Miles has abandonment and rejection issues. I'm sure it didn't help when I gave up 3 years ago. I mean, that's why I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to repair the damage that was done there. But it's not the only rejection and abandonment he's feeling. He's getting it across the board. So
Right. I want to touch upon this, which is on page 24, and then we can move on to the suicidal stuff, and then if you want, we can wrap up with parental rights being slowly dissolved. So on page 24, which you have as penned page 6, and it's another part you highlighted from this, because I can actually relate to this, but with the video game series. Reviewed current concerns and progress for staff. Miles continues to use Zoloft. Oh, see, I didn't catch that. What the heck is Zoloft?
it's an SSRI drug that I believe addresses anxiety and depression.
Okay, see, I didn't catch that little bit. And seems to be tolerating. He is responding well to programming and seems responding better to redirection. However, he continues to be extremely rigid in his thinking, which was referred to me quite a bit growing up. Still is sometimes. During breakdown, he would focus on topics related to Disney, which is his preferred topic, and he has limited ability to shift from this. So again, I'm going to touch upon from my own experience. That does not make me fully educated in what I'm talking about. Never claimed that. But because of my OCD and because of the struggles I had growing up, the thing that I attached to, and I drove my family nuts with it, was The Legend of Zelda. Because for me, I could see a character standing on his own, able to overcome anything, the dungeons, whatever. And so it got to a point where my parents had to take away anything Zelda related. Miles is doing the same thing with Disney, because he can somehow relate to the characters, and that's not being dissected either. What is he seeing in, because we don't even have a specification as to which Disney princesses. Is it is it Belle? Is it Ariel? Because that does make a difference as well, because each of the Disney princesses did something different. Is it Ariel, with her willing to pursue love no matter what the rules of her kingdom? Is it, because I know Mulan was considered a Disney princess too, still is kind of. Is it Mulan wanting to do the right thing no matter what, going against specific norms? Is it Sleeping Beauty? I don't. But you get what I'm saying. Is it Cinderella? with the help of friends, getting out of an abusive house and into a relationship which was high above her status. I mean, which one is it? Again, it's not being dissected into. So, again, it's something else I can relate to. I did not catch a spit while skimming through this the first time. But yeah, that poor kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I can speak a little bit about that. Is that Miles was just interested in all of the Disney princesses for the most part. And if we watched, like, one of our favorite things to do was we'd go thrift store shopping, and we'd go into the VHS section, and I got a VHS player at my house, and we would just find these old movies. And if we found one that wasn't Disney, but it had a character in there that might fill that role, he would ask me, like, is I'm trying to think of one. There's like Treasure Planet. I don't know if you remember that one, but there
Yes,
was
I.
Kira. Kira was in there. If I know a lot more about Disney princesses than most,
Are
than
you
the
are you
average
talking about the
lay viewer.
captain? Who are you? Which character are you talking about?
The woman that was found at Atlantis. I think her
Oh,
name was
Kira.
Kira.
Yes, yes. She's technically a Disney princess, even though she's not on the roster. But yes, Kira.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's great. You know that. Yeah. So we watched that, and I was trying to get him to focus more on cartoons that might have a male protagonist, and he would say, "Well, is Kira a princess?" And I would say, "Well, yeah. I mean, she's a princess," and they okay, and they get in his mind, okay, and so he would add her to the list of princesses that he would be interested in. And so again, to me, it was I could work with anything. It really wasn't a big deal to me. If I would have known that these interests are the interests he was developing are eventually going to lead down the path of somebody can tell me that Miles wants to be a girl, and he even has the capacity to know that, and then we're going to do that biologically. To me, it's just insanity.
Mm-hmm.
I have to pinch myself every day that we're even having to make this case. It's amazing to me,
No,
and it's so surreal.
no, it is. Like I said, and we can move on to the suicidal stuff because I know you really wanted to cover that part. Because I keep saying this because people keep asking me, how did you discover the Save James stuff? Well, it was a random article that was floating around. I think it was on Twitter, and I had to go look it up because I thought it was fake. I'm going, there's no way this is a freaking clickbait article because you do have extreme anti-LGBT groups that do like legit want to kill the LGBT, and they put out these clickbait articles going, this is freaking clickbait, this is garbage, there's no way. Until I looked up two other articles, which led me to the website, and the court documents was like, oh my freaking gosh, this is real. I was floored. I'm like, there's no, this is hell. But let me get to
Me
the
too. Me too. I was floored too. I when I saw Jeff's case starting to hit the radar, I was well, I could relate. I thought I was the only one. And like I said, it's an iceberg. It's just peeking the surface right now, and there's a lot more to come.
Mm-hmm. Let's touch upon the suicidal stuff. While you're start to bring that up, I'm going to go around and see if I can find the exact page. Let's see. Yeah, and this is something too. In regard, real quick, with the boys bullying him. This is on page 12, Pendus page 9. He showed good progress overall, but from initially screaming and crying and insisting that he did not have to be in a group with boys because I don't like boys, I don't like girls. So again, he was to the point where he didn't want to be around his own gender because of bullying. But yeah, and then yeah, he's on what is that? Sertraline and Glenfetzine, which is targeting his hypoarousal, which it's being implied this kid has PTSD symptoms, specific symptoms associated with PTSD. So, which is always
Yeah.
nice.
So when you do when you research some of these mental illness categories, PTSD and something they call CPTSD, which is complex post traumatic stress disorder, it actually it makes a lot of sense. I mean, forming minds. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm, going to give a lecture on all this stuff. I just happen
Mm-hmm.
to be having to like educate myself on it, and is, uh, people basically in a nutshell, people get traumatized. And when you're young and you get traumatized, and that could mean, some people have a high threshold for, what could be called trauma, and some people have a low threshold, uh, then the mind starts to protect itself, and the emotions start to protect themselves, and basically the personality starts to get formed around it, and it becomes what they call complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's actually, from what I can tell, a pretty decent diagnosis that can be worked with. If this was the only thing that we're having to deal with Miles, I would feel lucky because there's actually ways to address it. But when you talked about the medications there, yeah, Miles is basically being over medicated right now. Um, he's got people have pointed this out to me that know a lot more about this than I do. That he has an exaggerated um, medical regimen, or I should say medication regimen, and he's having trouble sleeping. You can read about that in the article, in the session notes here.
Yep,
It's because
page
he's
8.
okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean they talked about this with Elvis. Like he would take uppers and downers, and it finally killed him. Right? It's like, well, a lot of these medications, they're just counteracting each other. They're hyping the kid up, then they're drugging him down, and it's like they don't sync up with schedules. And I mean, it's a nightmare. That's a whole other element of, if this is all big pharma, it says market creation. You get the kids early, you get them on a diagnosis, you convince the parents to give them medications. The medications cause side effects. They give you more medications to address the side effects. The medications don't counteract with each other very well. I mean, it's, then you have a drug child who's even more highly suggestible. You take him to someone like Troy Eber Brown that starts convincing him, putting words into his mouth. I mean, Miles is just looking for a father figure. That's part of it. He's
Mm-hmm.
just, and Sarah's come along with her, with the problem, the issues that she has, and she's basically replacing me with someone like Troy Eber Brown, which I speculate is like her dream partner, someone that has no masculinity or something. So, my son is just attaching himself to the nearest father figure replacement, which breaks my heart too. That's why I'm trying to do something about it. But
Speaking of,
anyways,
um,
I can go on about it. Stop me at any time.
no, you're fine. I want you to be the main one talking, but I just thought of something because you said that he was attached to the Disney princesses. There's a couple that actually have what you could call issues with their father, but it's reconciled later. You have Ariel with King Triton. You have Mulan with her dad. You have Kira with her father. Let's see. God, doing a blank. Cinderella, no, her father's out of the picture. Oh yeah, and there's Jasmine, and I have my husband off to the side here. There's Jasmine with her father, the Sultan. Um, God, what's another princess? You have Belle with her father, Maurice. So I think if you really want to die, if they really, because again, this is my possibility. This just came to mind as I'm talking. If they really go in and dissect what princesses he's getting attached to, something tells me it's not going to be all of them. It's going to be specified once. And it's going to be the ones that have attachment to their fathers. Either they have to come over some struggle with their father has to see things a little bit differently. So I think they're going to find those specific ones that I just listed. I don't know, I
Yeah,
didn't
that would
just think about
be
it.
a path to go down. Yeah,
Um,
that would be interesting.
we are going near an hour, sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. But if you want to touch upon the suicidal stuff and the violent tendencies that he's starting to have, I'm on page 8, penned as page 11 for that, if you want to start talking about that, if you like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll try to make this pretty quick here. So yeah, there's a lot of writing on that.
Mm-hmm.
I won't read the whole thing, but basically my thoughts on that is this: if you start to look at what, see, I mean, people, as you know, they're playing catch up on all this. I mean, they hit the ground running. Parents are slowly waking up to what's really going on with their children, and so people are researching it, trying to get a handle on it, and trying to put on the brakes or pump the brakes. One of the ace in the holes, or kind of like the nuclear options that the other side, we'll call the other side, has, is that they're saying children are suicidal or that they will commit suicide if you don't allow them to transition. Now, this is a lie, and people are slowly pointing this out and getting the message out that what they're doing, for starters, is they're lying with statistics. They're basically saying the suicide rate for transgender people is higher than the average, the normal population, which is true if you account for all the people that have transitioned and then they regret it
Mm-hmm.
and they feel hopeless. So if you're going to lump in prepubescent children who are being pushed down this, garden path, then yeah, it's going to look like the suicide rate is high. Um, and so then they just scare the pants off the parent, to do this. And so my there also have been some articles that just come out very recently that there are kind of I don't know, celebrity gender clinicians that are openly talking about how they try to, when they have these children in their sessions, they're coaching them to to have suicidal tendencies. So they'll say, well, if you want to be a girl, if you're a boy and you really want to be a girl, well, if you go and get a knife out of the drawer and pretend like you're going to cut your, I mean, it's evil stuff, and this stuff is being chronicled. There's people that even have recorded it. I could try to send you a article if you haven't seen it already. But
I do have the article. I actually have it pulled up. It's by the Bridgehead. I can throw this in the description as well. And let me touch upon the medical professionals. One of these, and I forget her name. I would have to go back to my tweets. But one of these people were actually in Georgia List expert witnesses, where she was caught on videotape and put on YouTube because this was brought to my attention, and so that's why I tweeted it out there. Is that she was telling other psychiatrists to push the suicide narrative, even though it's bull. So yeah.
Yeah. I believe her name is Dr. Kennedy, if I'm not mistaken.
I want to say yes. Also, it's either Olson Kennedy, or it starts with an R. The other lady, because both of these quack doctors were supposed to be and Georgia List expert witnesses, but they never stuck on the stand or stuck either one of them. I know who you're talking about, though. It's like Hearth something. Oh, yes, but I know who you're talking about. Olson Kennedy's the one that came out and said it's normal or healthy for girls to get a double mastectomy. But yeah.
Yeah, I saw that footage. Yeah, that was a really dumb thing to say. Yeah, I can tell you my experience on this is that the last time I went in front of the family court judge, I was naive even at that point, and I thought all I got to do is bring this crazy situation to someone's attention that can actually make a difference. And the judge actually told me that, he said something to the effect of, "Do you know what the suicide rate is for transgender children?" And I thought it wasn't just a rhetorical question. So I said, "Well, yeah, actually." And I started to explain to him what I just talked to you about, and he shut me down. And they don't want to hear it. So this
Mm-mm.
it's such a misconception, and it's become so. It's kind of like it's a lazy reason that so, and the people that have the agenda, it becomes a bias, and these people just happen to have more authority in a child's life than I do, for example, and so they just throw that one out there as the nuclear option and say, well, your child's going to commit suicide if you don't allow them to transition, so we're going to override your parental rights, like would be in my case, and they'll call it a day.
Well, and something too, because suicide. Miles is suicidal right now, and apparently it's gotten to such a point where he's hurting Sarah, because it's documented where he's dug his nails into her arms, he slugged her in the face, and again, it's not being dissected whether these medications have a part in it, because again, I've never been on antidepressants. But what I have read about that, I know this much, it takes a full year for the chemicals to start circulating throughout your brain. And it also teaches your brain to shut off production of certain chemicals. And as you explained earlier, certain medications can collide, causing a lot of chaos. So that's not being dissected whether he's supposed to be on medication. His brain has been rewired chemically by these darn things, and he's on a couple of them. And he has rejection issues. Again, none of this is being dissected into, and he's getting to the point where he's being physically violent, trying to hurt himself and Sarah.
Yeah, yeah. If you the inserts that come with most of these psychotropic drugs or the SSRI class, one of the warnings is that they can cause suicidal ideation. So
Mm-hmm.
like we have been. This is another example of how we're having to play on the other side's playing field. If it was up to me, like if well, okay, so maybe this would be a good way to segue into the parental rights aspect of this. In a nutshell, this is a really simple part of this for me: is your child is your responsibility. It's really as simple as that. Now, I do know that it can become complicated when the two parents of that child do not see eye to eye. Then there's some conflict there, which the family court system capitalizes on immensely. But just at the end of the day, even with that complication involved, a person's child is their responsibility. Okay. Now, by the family courts, I'm just laying out really basics here, but I think a lot of people just don't think about this. Where the family courts are concerned, like I'll use myself as the example. Yeah, Miles is my responsibility. I have to send a check every month. If I didn't, they would start dismantling my life until they threw me in jail. So they got me over a barrel. I have to finance right now the destruction of my own child, which is another crazy aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if we could just get back to a person's child is their responsibility, and no one can come and tell you otherwise, unless there's some really blatant abuse going on or something like that. That would solve 90% of the problems we're talking about right now. Because, like, if the family court in Minnesota wasn't getting in my way, this problem would be solved. I would just put a stop to it. I'd just go into Central Care and I'd say, Miles is never going to come in here again. And we're going to wean him off of these drugs, and we're going to see what happens. And if we'll do it the right way because you had him on him so long, and we're going to start, addressing this in a different way. But family court system comes in, overrides my authority. They find the parent that will basically back them up. And then, we get the situation that we're looking at now, which is going to become, this is why I am certain that this problem we're looking at, this trans child situation, there's even worse manifestations of it than that. I think that are going to come down the pike until who knows what happens. But as long as they're using this as a lever to take away parental rights, basically give consent to children that are not even of legal age to drive a car or buy cigarettes or buy alcohol it's so crazy on its face, but I think that's what the real agenda is behind all of this. They want our kids. They do not want to have to deal with us. They want to take them from us, pretend like they have consent. If you have a problem with that, you're going to get marginalized, and they're going to use the family court systems to do it. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and me and you have talked about this at length. I think we brought it up in our last video or interview or whatnot, to where there's an agenda, and it kind of ties all in together. They want to make everybody more reliant on the government because, as I've said before in the last video, if you look at things like Teen Vogue, they've been advertising things like socialism. You have Antifa marching for communism here in the U.S., and the biggest factor of these two, socialism is a precursor to communism. If you actually look at the nuclear family, in order for these governments to succeed, the nuclear family has to be destroyed. Communism also talks about how the nuclear family is the destruction of capitalism. So the more that you have people relying on their government, the more it is easy to control them, limit resources. Like, I'll give an example. Let's look at what's happening in China right now. Xi Jinping is cracking down on religion. He is going through and saying, oh no, Xi Jinping can save them, not Jesus. That's another form of communism. Is if you take away the nuclear family, you take away personal beliefs, you take away religion, you take away all these individual freedoms and different personalities that break down society. Also, let's look at, and this is from the Disney movie Incredibles. Have you seen the Incredibles movie, Brenton?
Yeah, I saw the first one there. I haven't seen the second one.
Okay, so the first one, do you remember there's a line in there where Syndrome has Mr. Incredible pretty much, he has him disabled. He can't do anything, and he pretty much states the line, I'm going to sell my inventions so that everybody could be special, so that no one is. And that's kind of like what's happening now. Another thing with socialism and communism, there's no individuality. Everybody is the same, so what they're trying to do, and this may sound like Alex Jones' conspiracy theory, but you actually look at what's being pushed to the youth, transgenderism, socialism, communism starting to be crept in there, but they take away individuality, and by having everybody go sterile, oh, well, everyone's special, oh, everyone has their own identity, you actually lose the true meaning of identity, and you actually lose all these people in the process. So...
Yeah. Yeah, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. It's like they could change the terms up, they can call it something different every time, but what you're describing is a playbook that just seems to happen, given enough time in any society. There was a case in Canada that I'm sure you know about this. Just a couple of days ago, the verdict came down that a father in a kind of similar situation that I'm in and Jeff is in, and I imagine others. The court overruled him and said he has to start affirming his son as a girl. And I mean, it's starting. They're trying to they're trying to get a precedented case,
mm-hmm.
and that's where Jeffrey is in such a a special what should I call it, like a situation. He's in the pole position in a way, because to say James' case is going to set the precedent, and I think that's why they're having to gag him, because the only thing stopping us is we're not getting the message out to the general public. I still believe most people just don't really understand it, and as soon as they understand that there's a big difference between gay people and trans people, and there's a big difference between children being born gay, if that actually happens, it might. If Miles was only gay, I'd be thankful. It's a huge difference, and they're conflating the two. And I know this because I've been trying to explain this to my own parents, and they're boomers, they're typical boomers, and they just still don't quite understand that we're not talking about gayness here. We're not talking about gay children. We're talking about taking a healthy body and completely destroying it and making them dependent for life. They're probably going to regret it. They're probably going to want to commit suicide if they ever wake up to it. You're setting them down a lifetime of a nightmare. And I think that's just one of the big battles that right now, even just you and I talking, is just, slowly setting up the groundwork, because eventually this is going to have to be addressed.
Oh yeah, and because I came across a video the other day, and someone that I follow on Twitter who's against this stuff too actually tweeted it out. So there was a big thing against conversion therapy, and it's like, we can't force them to change identity, it's going to make them suicidal, blah blah blah. So conversion therapy, there's different forms, and I'm not talking about shock therapy, which that was messed up and barbaric. But conversion therapy has slowly been getting more and more outlawed, if you will. They try to attack Christian ministers, religious services that were offered to people who wanted to willingly steer away from that stuff. Conversion therapy is outlawed, but affirmation is perfectly okay. And again, you have the suicidal argument, oh, well, if you don't do this, then they're going to commit suicide and self-harm and all this other stuff. But if you try to, what was his name? Levine talked about, which is one of Jeff's expert witnesses. If you don't encourage them to desist, if you will, then they're going to commit suicide too if you encourage them to desist and not align with their biological body. So the suicide argument is being used at both fronts, and it's messed up. And people aren't quite catching on to this, but they're starting to wake up to it. I found that video, I'm like, that is dead on. People squawk and scream about conversion therapy, but they're okay with affirmation.
Yeah, they've basically labeled anything but affirming as conversion therapy, which then now is being passed to law in several states in lightning fast, hurried ways. I mean, you got to wonder. I mean, the government can't hardly do anything without a committee involved, and yet states are just passing these anti, what would you call it? Like anything but affirming, becomes outlawed. It's like
Anti-discrimination laws.
yeah, it's like like there's someone I listen to it related, to politics, but it's certainly all this stuff starts to come together, and his one of his things is he says that the LGBT lobby or mafia or whatever you want to call it, they're the new proxy warriors for the left, and in turn for the government. They might be small in number, they're I've heard 2% of the population or something like that, but they are being given so much enormous power because which then is being used to dismantle the rest of society's basic rights, because they're a protected class. It's going to get to the point where if it isn't already, that we're not even going to be able to have this conversation that you and I are having right now, because we're offending a protected class. So that's why, like, it might seem like we're kind of going out a few circles too far away from Miles here, but the reason why I think it's important is because if someone does come along and hears this conversation that we're having, and they don't even have children, or their children are protected from this, which I hope they are, they need to realize that this is going to be used. This template is going to be used to take away all of our rights eventually. Like, this is ground zero. We have to a parent has to be able to say no to what's being done to our children. If that right gets taken away from us, and that's what just happened in Canada, that's where Jeff is in the battle. I guess eventually my case might play a part in this. I'm sure there's going to be others, but this is extremely important. Has a lot more to do than just the trans child issue that we're talking about.
And there's two other factors too, is because there's another case which has nothing to do with a trans child. What has to do with there's a whole other extreme to where you have, it's called Justice for Kara's Kids, to where you have children who have been placed in the care, or rather, child, because one of them unfortunately did pass away due to trauma. Yeah, so that's the other side of it too, to where you have just CPS is broken system. The term comes to mind, follow the money. It's whoever has the most money, they're going to favor because they can get more money out of them. You also have Big Pharma. Big Pharma is making a lot of money because now they can sell hormones. Now they can push all these pseudo services, and they make money off of it.
Yeah. Anybody that loves their children would not want them to be within 1,000 miles of any of this. But they are using a cult-like program to get into certain people's lives. I mean, like my son's mother. It's hard to know how anyone can get into a mindset where they can be so close to this and not realize what's going on, but maybe she's been on psychotropics for 20 years probably. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe they start to slowly break down the wherewithal to resist some of these these pressures or something. You can only guess, but to me it's just so obvious. And it is every day I have to wonder, like, why are we even having to have this conversation? Like, of course, children aren't sexual. People point this out all the time when I'm looking across social media trying to push this message, is that people, I said this too. It's like, what 7, 8-year-old even thinks about sex in any way? They don't think heterosexually, homosexually. They don't think in trans. A child only starts to go down this path when someone sets them.
Oh, no, definitely. And because let me touch upon this too, because I know I'm gonna get somebody squawking and screaming in my comments about a past video of mine. Let me point this out too, because no, children aren't sexual, they don't understand the concept. And I'm gonna touch upon this, I had brought up, and people said I was too wordy with it, which is fine. But I had brought up a certain study to where it said, and the wording is strange, but let me finish, and then we're going to talk about the differences and why it's important. There was a class that was held in Texas. It's called Infants Can Experience Sexual Pleasure. Now, at first glance, because I thought, oh my god, these are perverts, what the hell's going on? And because Texas has gotten more LGBT friendly and you're starting to see these really messed up things start to go over there and all over the country. So I actually took the time to look at this curriculum, and it was a study of overall human sexual development. Children were like a small focus, but it was parents, pretty much questions a child would ask a parent, and teaching people how to talk to their children about these things. So that in itself has also been tossed out the window, because now you have that thrown in with all this gender dysphoria crap, and then you have the other extreme of it to where you do have people. Give you an example, something else that's also floating around. There was a class for children. It teaches them a bunch of sexual terms. So because there's been such confusion about exploiting kids, oh well, they consent to this, they can consent to that, they can decide to change their own gender, it's been all convoluted. Nobody knows how to separate it anymore, and that's what's scary, because just from my experience growing up, I went to church, I came from a Pentecostal background. The church never talked about this. And now you have a bunch of people freaking out. They don't know how to separate this stuff anymore. Is this pedophilic? Is this actual sexual education? That balance, those boundaries have been completely lost to the wind. So, for example, I bring up that video as an example because I had a lot of people freaking out going like, oh my god, you're pushing pedo shit. And it's like, no, this is different from that. But again, nobody sees that, and we're losing very important education, because there's a certain point where you do need to teach a child about themselves. But at the same time, you have to do it in a healthy manner and healthy boundaries. You cannot say, oh, well, I'm going to expose everything to you right now, or I'm not going to tell you anything at all.
Yeah.
So that's part of it too.
I think that it gets back to an underlying subject, which is parental rights and parental authority.
Yep.
It's a parent's job. It's a parent's job to it's their right and it's their job to decide when they want to talk about sex and what sex is with their children. People have been warning this for a long time, that the state should have nothing to do with that, schools should have nothing to do with that. Look how far we've gone. It's the slippery slope is actually a real thing.
Yep.
It starts out just, well, let us just do this, let us do that. And now it's drag queens are coming into schools. They're teaching children about anal sex at age 5, and that is real. If anyone's just heard that for the first time, go look it up. That's happening.
Oh yeah,
It's to me, it's part of you steal a child's innocence too early. Or that's a wrong way to put it. It's like if a person loses their innocence too early, they're a traumatized person, and a traumatized person can be more manipulated. They can be, they start to have more problems later. And good, well-adjusted, healthy people don't feed the pharmaceutical industry. They don't get a bunch of addictions. I mean, this gets into even bigger things, but that's what this is all about. I mean, if I would have known, and I have to not go down this road too often, but if I would have known before Miles came along, and I already had kind of this mindset when he was born, he never would have went to public school ever. He would have never went to a daycare. That's the way. That's what we have to get back to. You can't, in my opinion, it really is this quote unquote extreme. You can't interface with the system with your children anymore. Like your children cannot interface with the system anymore. It's that bad.
No, it is. Well, we're pushing over a little an hour here, so if you want to have any wrap-up thoughts, and like I said, I brought up because for my viewers who've been around for a while, I did bring that video as an example because, like I said, I had a lot of people freak out at me, and that's part of the problem too, because of all this gender dysphoric crap, because of all this really exploitive and really vulgar sexual education being pushed onto children, which a lot of it is pedophilic, by the way. The boundaries of what's actually healthy and normal to teach a child versus, oh no, you're actually grooming them for something very destructive. It's just that the difference is gone. The boundaries are gone. People, you have two extremes now. Oh no, it all needs to be tossed to the wind. Oh no, we should expose it all. So yeah, you now have two extremes. Nobody knows what boundaries are anymore. Very few people do. So, but
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is grooming. I'm glad you brought that word up too, because it at the end of the day, there's an element of that too. There's it's grooming. It's pedophiles are and let's just say they're in the midst. A lot of trans people don't want to be associated with pedophiles, but they just have to start um, seeing it for what it is. The pedophiles are either infiltrating their movement or they're one and the same. But
it
there's a huge pedophilic element to this.
you cannot separate the two. If you actually look at queer theory, and I forget the guy's name because this trans crap comes from queer theory. Pedophilia is interlaced into queer theory due to one of the founders making it and also advocating for boy love. So, yeah, no, it's interlaced. You cannot separate one from the other. So, go look up queer theory. You will find that.
I will. Yeah, I haven't looked much into that. And I will.
But with
Yeah, and the only reason why I put like a roughly an hour, that was my thought, was I'm just trying to think of everybody else here. Everyone lives such busy lives, and there's so much to pay attention to out there. I just hope that we can, retain some people to listen to what we're saying here. I think that this is important. This is huge. This is the most underreported issue in our society. I've talked to several people, reporters that are even saying, Christian reporters are saying, when is Trump going to bring this up as a topic, for reelection? When are high profile congressmen going to start bringing the subject up? It's mystifying. It's sitting there in plain sight, and no one's talking about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hopefully you were not echoing. But yeah, do you have any last final thoughts or anything? All the links are in the description below. Excuse me, I'm really low. As I was saying, all the links to this is in the description below if you guys want. There's the GoFundMe link, which Memory and Hollow have been showing out. There's a Facebook page. There's the YouTube channel. Any last things you want to say, Bretton, before we close it off here?
Yeah, quickly, I'll say thank you. Yeah, I'm still looking for the right lawyer, the right attorney. I had a lead on one, and we were talking for a while, and I was giving him information, to build up a case, but he's gotten busy, or I haven't heard back from him in a while. He's a good one that was, has taken on this subject in different ways in Minnesota, but I won't mention his name in case he ever hears this. But like, maybe he'll come back. Who knows? But I am looking for the right attorney to the next time we go into family court. I want to go in there. Um, a disadvantage I've had for this whole time is I've been representing myself, and they just find it too easy to kind of steamroll you. So, if anybody does know of a good attorney in Minnesota um, that might be interested in talking to me, we are slowly raising money. I'm up to, it's not a fortune, but we're up to about $2,000 now. All of that is earmarked and sitting aside, waiting to give it to the right attorney, and that's just a start. I'm throwing my own money into this, and it's slowly trickling in. So if anybody's got some leads on that, please contact me through any of the Save Miles social media that I'm slowly building up, or maybe Kayla here, or somebody. But that's kind of the missing piece of the battle that we're running into right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Patriarch. I do. Here's the thing. I know of one lawyer, but and this is nothing to him. So, guys, for watching my channel and following the Vic Manana stuff, this is not me shit talking Rakita Law. Okay. Rakita Law is out of Minnesota, but I don't know. I don't know if he has any experience in the family court. He's a YouTube lawyer. He handles things a bit differently. But he does have his license, he does practice, so that's the only one, and I had tagged him at one point in Twitter, and also Ty Beard, he's in Texas here, or Texas over there, I'm not in Texas, but I'm kind of nervous about kind of referring you to Rakita Law, again, the situation with the Vic Mañana stuff, again, not shit talking the guy, but I don't wholly agree with the way that he's handled it, but at the same time, I don't know. I could give you, he does have a website, and he does have a Twitter, but again, I don't know how far he's going to go with stuff, if that makes sense. I don't know how much experience he has or how much he really knows about this stuff. I really don't, but that's the only word that comes to mind.
Yeah, I'll follow any lead. I will. I follow every lead. all they can say is no, and yeah, that's how these things happen. Sometimes just the right person hears the right thing, and it just kind of starts from there. And if anyone has any leads, please just feel free to contact me. This coming week, I have a list of attorneys that consider themselves Christian attorneys, so they belong to a Christian attorneys organization, and I'm just going to start calling them and pitching my. I'll say this really quickly is I have been making calls to all of what you call the traditional media, like newspapers and local television stations in a 3-state radius. I am yet to get one of them to take this up or to write a story about it, or there is, I call it the pharmaceutical media, because that's basically where most of their funding comes from. So they can't touch this stuff with a 10-foot pole. But I thought maybe I'll just get that rogue reporter that'll take it on and want to talk about it in even a fence-setting sort of way. There is a total media blackout on the trans kid puberty blocker issue.
Yeah, there is. We're keeping on time here. My husband has something for 7:30, but I will give you his Twitter handle. And again, I'm not trying to shit talk Rakita Law. I'm really not. He's the only one that comes to mind in Minnesota. I'm a little bit worried. Now, I will say I have not seen him talk about any of his personal cases. I'm a little bit worried about this turning into what you can call a dumpster fire. If he agrees to look at it, I've tried to poke at him about the Save James stuff in the past. He's a busy guy. He has his own firm, and then he does stuff at night where he streams. So again, I will give you his Twitter handle. I will try to reach out to him on Discord, see if he'll at least poke around through stuff, and kind of take off from there. He has a more extensive reach than I ever could. So we'll see how it goes, and I will keep you posted whether or not I can actually get him to respond to me. So we've kind of bumped heads in the past, and yeah. But yeah, I will give it a shot, because that's the only one that comes to mind. I don't know any other lawyers in Minnesota.
Well, you're already doing enough. You're helping enough, and you're doing enough good, Kayla. So I'll just keep looking. But yeah, if there's any leads come along, that'd be great. Send them to me, and just thank you so much for your time again tonight, and sticking with me. And it's it's I don't know what to say. I just thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Hopefully, hopefully we can get bigger people involved, and I know the more giants get involved, the more mass spread we can get this. So hopefully we can get some bigger faces in here.
Yeah, you just got to keep chipping away until something happens, and that's what I'm doing. So it's all you can do. So but I'll keep at it, and just thank you.
You're welcome. Like I said, I'm gonna end it here. You have a good night, but I will send you a text or DM with his Twitter handle.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, Kayla.
All right. Have a good night, Britton.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, so that wraps it up, guys. That was Brett and Nets of Save Miles Gortz. Again, not shit talking Rakita. It just, from what you guys seen of the Save James situation, Save Miles is it's different from the Vic Manana stuff. You have to be careful, and I'm sure Rakito would know that. I don't even know if he would have an interest, but if you guys can poke at him for me as well, if you come across the stream, that would be great. If he knows anybody, because he knows multiple words. I mean, he hooked up Vic Manana with Ty Beard, so hopefully we can get, if not him, somebody he's associated with that knows, has extensive knowledge about family court in Minnesota, because we really need to get the ball rolling. If you guys want to share and tweet out the GoFundMe, that'd be awesome as well. Link is in the description. Also, Memory and Hollow have been advertising that. That's the only link. Again, this stream is not monetized. You won't find any advertising of my stuff on here. So, but you guys have a good night, and I'll see you when there's another update. Do not forget, and I'll tweet this out as it gets closer to the date. As for the Save James, January 29th, we have the motion to enter and then the motion to conform, which will be heard. So I will, if I get any updates about that in the meantime, I will let you guys know. But until then, I'll see you guys later.